Picture this. It's 2006. You're a junior in high school and you're about to throw your first big high school party. But earlier that day, you go to GameStop and you buy Resident Evil 4. You get home and you have a few hours to kill before your friends arrive, so you load it up and then you end up staying up all night playing as Leon, rescuing Ashley, and battling some of the most horrific creatures you have ever witnessed. That was my introduction to one of the greatest pieces of media ever created.
Resident Evil 4.
Little did I know that this game and this franchise were going to be so revolutionary to the video games industry, and I also had no idea just how big of an impact this game had on my life. Well, here we are in 2023, and we are all now playing the Resident Evil 4 remake and feeling that same sense of awe and wonder we did when playing the original nearly 20 years prior. Now, perhaps there is some nostalgia baked into this amazing Resident Evil cake, but I would argue that this remake has gone further than any remake has ever gone before, even surpassing the heavy dose of nostalgia that these games tend to rely on. Capcom has delivered such an expansive and innovative package that anyone who is saying this is merely a copy and paste is sadly mistaken. It's not often that experiences like these come around, and it's certainly not often that they are this polished and pristine. The developers for Resident Evil 4 have somehow outdone themselves in a way that I never knew possible, taking what was a masterpiece all of those years ago and turning the remake into something familiar, fresh, and modern, while yet again pushing the franchise to new heights and the video game industry to new unforeseen standards. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Resident Evil 4 Remake. So listen, key takeaways here are that this remake is so damn good. Not only is it one of the best video games I have ever played, but it rivals the original. I don't think it's necessarily better than the original, I think that it's simply different. And after playing both RE4 titles side by side, it's very clear to me that Capcom deliberately chose to honor both the original game while simultaneously forging a new path for this remake. Up until the launch of RE4, a question I kept coming back to was, why was something like Resident Evil 4 ever on the table to be remade in the first place? The original game is such a masterpiece that it doesn't really seem like a remake would do a whole lot other than add a graphical facelift and maybe modernize the control scheme. When we take a look at the remakes from Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, those make sense. In the 90s, the technology was drastically underpowered compared to the consoles and PCs that the average consumer has today. So that line in development from point A to point B, it's much clearer when it comes to understanding what those remakes were supposed to be. But Resident Evil 4 from 2005 was not only incredibly ahead of its time, it's also one of those games that has defined third-person action games up to the present day. So what exactly do you do here? Well, Capcom developers had similar questions and had been ruminating exactly how to handle things, and they were also wondering if they should even touch the game that is the cornerstone of the Resident Evil franchise.
名作として名高いんで、難しいっていうので最初はやりたくなかったんですけど、話を受けて、ある程度じゃあ自分らでちょっと改めて見てみるって言ってプレイしてみんなで意見を一回出した時に、名作とはいえ今見るとやっぱりまだ改善の余地はあるよねっていうのが、感じられたんでチーム内でもそこにちょっとこう。
The series has come a long way since 2005, bringing about titles like RE7 and RE8, which also drastically changed the formula of what Capcom has curated over the years. Remaking this title of all titles was going to be tough, which is why outlining the developmental mission was pertinent. And in doing just that, Capcom has not only remade RE4 successfully, they have created a new standard for how the Resident Evil games will be carried forward in this new generation. Man, where do I begin? This game runs flawlessly. I haven't had any stuttering, crashing, or save malfunctions, no wacky AI or glitched out bosses. There have been 0 bugs that I can even remember. This is a very impressive showing by the developers and reminds me why I do love AAA gaming so much, because when everything is running efficiently and polished brilliantly, these games are damn near magical. So I have played the demo on all platforms, including the Steam Deck, and I've played the full game on PS5. I'm working my way through the PC and Steam Deck port of the full game as we speak, and it's been running like a dream. I do have a mix of different types of hardware, from a 2080 Ti, a 3080, and a 3080 Ti, and I won't be able to finish the PC port and test it by the time this review goes live, but I will come back to this video and update the description so that you can see how things run on perhaps a setup that's close to yours. So check that out right beneath the like button. But honestly, the fact that this brand new AAA game can run at 720p 60 FPS on the Steam Deck leads me to believe that whatever platform you choose, you're gonna be just fine. And while I could gush over how amazing it is to have a smooth launch experience, it would actually be unfair of me to bring that up without talking about the sheer amount of content that is packed into this game. Generally, with every RE title, there is a challenge system where you can earn points which allow you to unlock cool rewards in the menu. This could be character skins or models, concept art, just really cool stuff. And it's all totally free and not a broken, buggy mess. And they added New Game Plus. Not even God of War Ragnarok had that at launch. This truly goes to show just how much Capcom cares, not only about this game, but about the fans as a whole. They poured their hearts and soul into this, and you can see it in every nook and cranny of this remake. The only thing I think that is missing from this edition is the Mercenaries mode and the Ada Wong Separate Ways DLC, but it seems that data miners have already found reference to its existence in the code of the game, meaning it will likely be coming as DLC down the line. And while I can understand and empathize not wanting to pay for a DLC pack that we have had for 20 years at this point, hopefully the juice will be worth the wallet squeeze, assuming Capcom delivers it at the same level they did for the main game. But we can worry about this another day. Pivoting ever so slightly, art direction. This is one of the most beautiful games I have ever played. And this is an area where comparing it to the original is almost not even fair, because back in 2005, the graphical stylings of Resident Evil were considered top tier, especially when it came to its cinematics.
So we spent a lot of time and effort in making the total finished product, especially the cutscenes, where new enemies are introduced, really feel realistic to the player. When trying out this new camera, there was a lot of trial and error, seeing how close to or how far from the character would work the best. We've also added letterbox to certain scenes to make it more cinematic, more dramatic. Plus, with a narrower view, there's more tension, and by being up close, it's easier to feel like you're right there in the game. So I think simply changing the camera has added a lot of drama to the game.
This is definitely one of my favorite aspects of Resident Evil as a whole. The music, the way that the camera angles move, the sound of your gun popping off, and the ganado screaming Spanish while you slowly bleed out your resources. My God, it's so good. The moments of battle are intense and chaotic just from the audio and visuals alone. But a good cinematic feel isn't always about the big moments. It's about the subtle moments too, allowing the player to breathe in between large set-piece moments. It's about using it correctly. For example, after you finally make it to the castle, Leon and Ashley have to enter a prison to find their next key item. And if there is one thing that we have learned from RE8, Capcom knows how to create a spooky prison atmosphere. But this time, they have outdone themselves. The scene has been completely transformed from the original. You're in a pitch black prison that's eerily silent, accompanied by the painful screams of a chained up enemy far away. Take a listen.
What was that? Do they keep animals down here or something?
You see how good it is? God, I love it. This is a beautiful moment when the enemy design, art direction, sound, and cinematic flair all come together to slowly build tension with an ultimate payoff at the end. This was absolutely terrifying, and I loved every second of it. When it comes to the narrative elements of this game, I do believe that the tone and portrayal of Leon, his mission, and his challenges is a style I much prefer to the original. Initially, when I was writing the script, I was going to state that the storyline and characters and all that stuff were better than the original, but I don't think that's the right way of looking at it. Part of the charm of the 05 version is just how silly, campy, and over the top everything is, and that preposterous tone is exactly why some people love that original game. But after playing both of these games back to back, I've come to find that while the darker and grittier reboot tactic has worn its welcome, the Capcom devs delivered an absolutely exceptional take on the narrative direction of this remake. Obviously, we all know the story by now. Leon, who is a badass agent for the president, is traumatized by the events of Raccoon City that took place in RE2, and he is assigned a task to rescue the president's daughter from a small village in Spain. This is a little different than the original story, but it's ultimately the same idea. But I think this is a nice change because it seems to fit with the more serious tone that the game is going for, as well as fit with the other remakes from RE2 and RE3 that we got just a few years ago. Characters all have a much more mature tone to them, which parallels the art direction and the cinematic elements we were talking about a moment ago. Leon and Ashley definitely received the biggest facelifts, both delivering great performances, especially Leon, who went from a semi-silent protagonist and also kind of ditzy.
They're called the Los Illuminados.
Los Illuminados? That's a mouthful.
Mainly only talking during radio conversations and some cutscenes, to a more stoic, intelligent, and talkative character. And I prefer hearing Leon speak every so often during battle or walking around versus reading text on a screen. It adds to the sense of immersion that dictates that level of intensity I should be feeling solely based on Leon's thoughts and feelings. Another big concern people had in the original was how Ashley was portrayed. A lot of the times you will hear that Ashley is annoying in the original and that she needed to be toned down. But after playing both games, I don't really feel like she was that annoying in the first game. In fact, I feel like they didn't utilize her enough, whereas in the RE4 remake, she feels like a little sidekick as opposed to a toddler that you have to babysit. Something else I noticed was they lowered the amount of sexual references they would make to Ashley. In the original game, there are multiple lines from Leon and Luis, even from Ashley herself, where they're talking about her butt or how developed she is, and there are many times where you can see up her skirt. This happens so much that the devs actually added voice lines so that if you look up Ashley's skirt with your gun, she'll call you a perv.
Oh, you pervert! Are you out of your mind?
I knew you'd be fine if you landed on your butt.
I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics, too.
So, after you take me back to my place, how about we do some, overtime?
Sorry.
And while I do think some of that stuff is funny, it definitely doesn't fit with this new tone that the devs are striving for. That same tonal pivot can be applied to basically all the main characters in the remake. Luis is much more serious and is probably the most improved out of everybody. Ada is just as mysterious as she was prior, and Krauser is the huge asshole that we all know and love. What really surprised me was how Capcom updated and changed the villains. I don't think the changes were very noticeable if you hadn't played the original recently, but they are much more believable and sinister, which is a welcome change. I always felt like Ramon Salazar was a little goofy to me, and I never took it seriously or his existence at all. Just always felt like a silly obstacle meant for laughs. But in the remake, Ramon was much darker. He wasn't interested in the cat and mouse game that he played in the original with Leon. He just wanted to kill him and capture Ashley by any means necessary. And you could feel that. Ramon wasn't the only one who received this type of change. Sadler was also given a reworking in a similar vein. Again, the original made Sadler a classic cackling villain, and while he does have the same intentions in both games, the way his agenda is presented is much more believable and adds to the tension that make the stakes so high. But even with all of this vision brought to life from the developers, there is only so much that they can carry without the help from their voice acting team. And for the most part, I think all of the characters did an exceptional job while standing on the shoulders of giants. But during my playthrough of the original, I noticed that Ada's character was much more lively while obtaining that mystery. And I also noticed that Ada's character in the remake, played by Lily Gao, was a lot more dull and just flat.
Not a bad move. Very smooth.
So who are you working for this time?
Oh, Leon. You know I don't work in town. Leave the girl. She's lost no matter what. You walk away now, and who knows? Maybe you'll live to meet me again. And then I might get you that greeting you were looking for.
Long time no see.
Ada. So it is true.
True? About what?
You, working with Wesker.
I see you've been doing your homework.
Why, Ada?
What's it to you?
Why are you here? Why'd you show up like this?
See you around.
Ada!
And after looking into this a little bit more, apparently there is a huge controversy surrounding Lily Gao's portrayal of Ada. Now, if you're unaware, Lily played Ada in the Resident Evil adaptation called Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, which is presumably why she earned herself the role for the remake. And according to Gao herself and others covering the story, fans were apparently so outraged at her performance and apparent defaming of Ada Wong that she had to delete all of her social media posts except for one about white privilege that she left up to lecture her fans about their behavior. Now, I don't think Lily's performance is great, and if you see the movie, it's also just as mediocre, but I can also kind of see how it may fit. Ada has always seemed emotionally detached, so it may be a good thing to have somebody with a, flat inflection in their vocal presence. But here's the thing, if you're getting pissed off and yelling at somebody about their job in a negative and aggressive way, you suck. And there's just no need for that. But on the other hand, if you're not able to accept actual criticism for your job when your job is to serve your fan base or customer base, well, then you also suck. And I think Lily Gao probably did get some mean stuff thrown her way. It's the internet and people are assholes. There's nothing you can do about that. But I bet most people just gave her criticism and she couldn't handle it. And you know what? I can understand that. Getting a huge wave of dislike thrown in your face when you're not used to it sounds like an actual hellscape. But what you don't do is pull the race card and lecture everyone that you are of moral superiority.
Stay back!
2005's Resident Evil shook things up for the franchise when it brought in its tank controls mechanic, allowing Leon to freely move and control the camera from that third-person perspective. It was a big deal as the traditional static camera had been utterly abandoned. But there was good reason for this shift in gameplay, as apparently many developers were not only fatigued with the Resident Evil franchise at this point, but didn't know exactly where to take things. Luckily, the game director and lead producer had a vision, and after many versions canned or turned into a brand new franchise, they finally landed on the RE4 formula that we know and love today.
I've worked on a number of Resident Evil titles in the past, and honestly, I think the series had been recycling the same patterns, the same gameplay each time. The creators were starting to get bored with it, and many moved to other projects. So I spoke to Mikami-san, the director, and we talked about reshaping the series and winning back the fans, as well as winning over new fans who thought they would never play a Resident Evil game. So in order to revitalize the series, we've given it a complete makeover.
What's really interesting to me about all of this is how history is repeating itself, with Capcom developers in 2023 having similar feelings when it came to building this remake.
でゲームプレイに関しては、操作性の部分でちょっと独特の操作の部分がやっぱあったので、そこはもう真っ先に直そうっていうところと、ゲームメカニクスに関してもちょっと今やるんだったらもっといろいろできるんじゃないかっていうので、壁の方とか中心にその辺もちょっといくつか。
Now, I know that there are many pieces of a video game that come together to form a complete picture. But I think it's safe to say that when looking at all of those pieces individually, the weight of them is clearly different. And combat is most certainly one of the more important aspects of a video game, specifically for games in the survival horror genre. And goddamn, did Capcom deliver. Now please understand that I do enjoy the tank controls from 05. I really do. But I would be lying to myself if I said that I didn't enjoy the combat in the remake more. Not only do I think that this combat and gameplay loop is better than the original, I think it's better than the RE2 remake and the RE3 remake, and will likely shape the way that Resident Evil games are made from this point on. That's how good I think it is. However, I understand that the updates in movement and combat are a big departure compared to the original's tank controls. You can now move and shoot, move and knife, move and reload, You can even move and reload and grab items on the ground, and that changes a lot. I was initially worried that Capcom wasn't going to adjust for this properly, as the enemy design has been catered to Leon standing still while he fired. But Capcom is a AAA gaming studio and they know what they are doing. So to combat this problem, pun intended, the devs increased the speed, they increased the attack power and attack variations, and the amount of enemies given in a situation has also seen an influx. If you think that the old game had a lot of enemies, just wait until you play the remake. Holy hell. Another example of this like maneuver change is that stunning enemies is not as effective as it was in the original, because now you have that ability to maneuver while you attack and it puts you at such an advantage, so the only counter is to strengthen enemies as a whole. But besides movement, one of the first big changes I noticed when going back to the original was the inventory system. In the remake, the inventory is much more intuitive compared to the older version, where you would be constantly pivoting back and forth between the inventory and combat for every single decision you had to make. Whereas now, there is much less of that clunkiness, and the addition of creating ammunition from gunpowder and generic resources, yes, it's just called resources, using the inventory in this new way alongside the weapon wheel allows you to fly through enemy encounters in a very fresh and exciting way. Capcom also removed QuickTime events, which was definitely a smart move. I'm not a huge QuickTime event fan. I can live with or without them, but I don't feel like they fit in this particular case, so I'm certain that the devs made the right call. Good job, Capcom. The guns, they are all top shelf. There is not one weapon that you can't use. They are all so powerful, so fun to use, and they sound fucking amazing. I am so excited to do a second and third playthrough just so I can experience weapons that I didn't really get a chance to invest a lot of time in. But here's the thing, you may not like some of these changes. Maybe you prefer the QTE events, or maybe you are unhappy with the updated movement system. But even if you hate every single change made, there is still one thing that you can't hate and makes the game so much better and so much more fun: the combat knife. I love this knife. It is so good. Adding in a parrying system and a knife health system is one of the best things I think Capcom could have brought into this particular game. Being able to parry things and block attacks, stab foes who are turning, slicing Ganado jugulars as they steal Ashley away from you, it's absolutely perfect.
例えばクラウザー戦があって、そこでナイフ同士で戦うっていう攻防があった時に、パリみたいなシステムがあったら、それを表現できるんじゃないかなってちょっと考えて、で全体的にひょっとしたら村人も武器とかで殴ってくるんで、全体的に使えるんじゃないかなっていうので今回入れたのがパリのシステムとかだったりしますね。
For every area that I thought could possibly create a misstep, Capcom countered that and more. They know what they're doing when it comes to having a great combat experience and flow. There was never a moment that I couldn't figure my way out of eventually. With enough attempts, resource management, and strategy, you will succeed using the tools at your disposal. But of course, in order to have great combat, you need great enemies. And this was something I didn't expect to change very much. And I suppose, overall, the enemy stylization is the same. You have your generic Ganados, heavies, mini-bosses, and main bosses. However, the original game tended to keep the Ganados more like people who had become infected, and they almost seemed ordinary, whereas in the remake they tended to be a lot more severely demented, and you could see that the wrath that Sadler had placed upon this town was just pure evil. There are many great additions and updates that have been made to the enemy design: the hammer swinging, cowhead wearing brute, the armored knights sleuthing around in the dark, and the freakish blind claw mini boss. These enemies left such an impact on me simply by the way that they looked and how I felt when I interacted with them. What's great about RE4 in general is it maintains this slow arc of progression from the start of the game up until the very end, and it allows the players to learn and adapt as new enemies are put in their way. Enemies are peppered in quite nicely to every environment, and there is always constant constant action to the point where you're never going to get bored or see the same thing twice. I will argue that a little more downtime would have been nice, as it seemed around every corner I was in another big battle. Being able to take in the sights and sounds of a world this beautiful is sometimes done through puzzle solving and simply navigating your way from point A to point B. I'm not saying that I don't love combat, I most certainly do, but you know, sometimes I would just like to be able to take a little breather. I don't know, maybe it's just me. But bosses, man, I love boss fights, and it's hands down my favorite thing in video games. And yes, this game has some good ones. Spoiler warning. There are a ton of great experiences here, El Gigante, Del Lago, Mendez, but I think my favorite has to be the Ramon Salazar boss battle. The original was definitely a great fight, but it was a little slow and, dare I say, not very threatening. While it is definitely the highlight of the 05 version of this game, the remake takes full advantage of Leon's new movement set and really speeds things up. The ending boss fight with Sadler is also great, very reminiscent of the original, same with the Dos Gigantes, as well as the addition of the Chainsaw Sisters, but unfortunately Capcom decided to cut out one of my favorite experiences from the remake, and I'm not sure why. In the original edition, there was a sort of out-of-place boss around the last third of the game named U3 or It. This boss had two phases. One was in a shipping container platform that was like suspended in the air, and Leon had to unlock these gates before a timer ran out while this boss just kicks your ass. The second wave was on a cliffside where you would learn that U3 has a centipede-like feature that allows him to burrow in the ground and pop up and attack you. And I think that this boss was definitely out of place in the original game, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I think there was no reason why we couldn't have worked it in some way, shape, or form, but apparently the developers just thought otherwise. But that isn't all that Capcom decided to change. The level design in Resident Evil 4 Remake is much improved comparatively. The spaces are bigger yet more densely populated, they are spookier yet more action-packed, and they are even grandiose, making you feel small, but paired with a claustrophobia as soon as you turn the corner to travel somewhere new. The best example of this is the castle. You stand outside of this looming structure where all the unknown terrors await you. After Leon and Ashley finally enter, they are encountered with many enemies trying to take them down through tight corridors and long sightlines. After defeating all of the Ganado, they make their way to the castle's great audience chamber, appearing so small and insignificant to Roman Salazar, while fog coats the floor like snow. The level design is why RE4 was the greatest of its time back in 05, and I'm pleased to say that Capcom has succeeded again with connecting this dark and seedy world together. It isn't confusing to travel through, not an inch of space is wasted, and the atmosphere tying it all together makes this some of the best level design I've ever seen. Going through and listing every level and breaking it down is really just a waste of time, as this is a game you have to experience for yourself, as you will see the areas that you loved from the first game become lifted up and brought to new heights. Reviewing a remake is one of the more challenging things to discuss in gaming, because you know exactly what this game has to offer already. You know it's going to be good, you've played it before. That being said, what Capcom has done here isn't simply just remake RE4 for the sake of remaking it. They have taken something that we love, given it a fresh coat of paint, and made it its own thing while completely preserving the roots of which it was born. The way this game looks and feels, it's truly magnificent. I really don't think I could want anything more. The best way to look at this remake is like this. If the original RE4 was revolutionary to the Resident Evil series in 2005, then the RE4 remake is revolutionary to not only the remakes that have already come out, but to the entirety of the series itself. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, and why not click on the next video that's on your screen? That's YouTube who's recommended it to you, not me, and you wouldn't want to disappoint YouTube now, would you?